Compare that to what we've seen over the last 3.5 years with Russia and the special military operation. Would you agree that the Russians have appeared to be pretty flexible and quick to respond when they got something on the front lines that's not working?
I'll tell you, Larry. I wish I could cite the specific study. I want to say it was in the Washington Post, maybe around the ninth month of the war. I can't remember, but they did an analysis to find out why the Russian military had made so many tactical errors and operational errors, et cetera. And it turned out that the Russian military, by the way, it really surprised me. I thought they would be a lot better on day one than they were, because I'd been seeing over the previous years a
Yeah.
lot of these large scale efforts, Zapad 2020, 2021 or something like that. A lot of big operations every other year, every 2 years, something like that. Big scale too. And I thought, they have done a lot of these things. Because I thought it must be like what we did with Reforger, because I
Hmm.
had taken part in the Reforger exercises where they had these bunch of units over maneuvering over hundreds of kilometers, et cetera. And I knew how good those were, and I figured the Russians were doing the same. But it turns out that the Russians were doing kind of what we did at the FCS, and they just papered over a lot of stuff, and they just pretended to do some, and they claimed all these successes. Really, they were just driving around in preordained, routes, et cetera. And so they did not actually learn lessons until it cost them blood.
Yeah.
And once it started costing them blood, then all of a sudden, all that other crap went out the window. They fired people who were not performing. They brought people up from the bottom who were. They started listening to people, and even that was slow. But then once they finally got to that point to where now all of a sudden they're at least as much as you can in a human entity, a well-oiled machine. We're still back in the FCS days. That's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why I say we cannot compete with Russia right now. However arrogantly we want to say we're better than them, by far the best in the world, et cetera, because we haven't burned away all of that chaff. We haven't burned away the lessons not learned, et cetera, and we still just ignore the things that don't work and pretend they will.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
Russians, it's life and death. So you don't get to have bureaucracy over there. You either fix it or you die and fail. And well, they've chosen the path that seems pretty effective so far.
Well, yeah, I've been impressed with, and it's also been on the Ukrainian side. But what we've seen, so
Yeah.
early on when the tanks are getting blown up by drones, they came out initially, they put a cage around it, and they keep innovating what they're doing with to protect the tanks, and they've actually now looked like got a system that works. Similarly with, you know, at the outbreak of the war, I wasn't paying attention at all. I didn't even think about drones. Now here we are, 46 months later. That's about all that we're talking about is the drone, the importance, and it's not just one kind; it's
Yeah.
different
Many
varieties,
classes. Yeah.
and they've gotten to where I don't know, and maybe you've got some insight on this. Right now, what we're seeing with the Russians is troops on the ground are in immediate communication with the guys running the drones. They've got a net-centric combat operation. And so you don't have to wait for an answer to come back. You can get a real-time answer. Do you think we're up to speed on that, or are we lagging behind?
No, that's virtually guaranteed we're way behind. And the best example that I can see, you may remember earlier this summer, there was a really corny video that Secretary of Defense Hegseth published where
Well,
he's talking in front of the Pentagon and there's these drones following behind him, and he's talking about how we're going to do all this great stuff. And then just about a week or so ago, there is a story, I think you and I even talked about it last time you were on, where we said that by 2027 we're going to be able to produce up to 300,000 drones. And I popped a couple of headlines on there that both the Ukrainians and the Russians right now are producing around 100,000 per month.
yeah,
And of course, as you just alluded to, even with that, you have to have this constant cycle of innovation. The enemy makes a counter innovation. You have to counter the counter, and it just never stops.
right,
And you've
right.
got to have a real nimbleness of mind and a system that can be rapidly adjusted. When you're talking about putting in orders for something a year and a half from now, to get up to 300,000. I mean, that shows you don't have any nimbleness of mind or recognizing how rapidly and how fast things change on the modern battlefield. And you take that mind that's thinking in a year and a half increments and you put it onto a field where somebody's figuring in the next 4 or 5 days and they keep moving back and forth you're not going to survive very long on that battlefield.
All right, folks, hold on just a second. We've got something important to share with you. First off, a big thank you for all your incredible support. Our team's been putting in the hours, really working hard to bring you insightful guests, new and improved formats, solid, high-quality analysis every week. Our next goal, hitting that 100,000 subscriber mark and getting that silver button. Let's make it happen together. Every like, comment, share, and subscription truly helps us grow and keep improving. All right then, let's get back to the video.
Well, in fact, that's what when I first read Andre Martianos, his first book, Losing Military Supremacy. Boy, that was an eye opener. And the same things that you have now commented on. That's what he was pointing out. And God help us if we actually go forward with some of this nonsense about getting into combat, because we're not ready.
And Larry, I mean, that's more poignant and more urgent than we may have thought even yesterday. This morning, the Mark Rutte, NATO Secretary General, all but laid out a declaration that we're going to war against Russia. You may think that's an overstatement, but it's not. If you look at this speech that he gave this morning in Germany, this said Russia's coming after us and we have to be ready to strike. And he just laid out all these things are going to do, very, very bellicose statements, et cetera. And this just gets to one of the issues that people just refuse to acknowledge in the West, that actions have consequences. We should have already learned this lesson, but we haven't. And when you say those kinds of things and you start taking actions and funding things, what does anyone think that the Russians are going to do in response? But they're going to have a reaction to it.
Yes.
They're going to have to, by requirement, they're going to have to prepare for it, not just to win this war, but you're going to make them actually start ramping up to do things to meet this, this force that you're talking about bringing closer to the Russian border. I mean, this is so absurd. There should never be a war between NATO and Russia. No chance that there should ever be a war. There's no necessity for it unless we make one.
Right.
And then you have the chance for miscalculation, stupidity, or any accident even, and then we could be in one. And that is why this is so alarming to me.